And so if we're placing our worth in these physical things in an infinite game of a soul, then we've still not quite learned the lesson that we came here to learn.
You have this ability to connect people based on their energetics, and because you see them, you hear them, you love them, and you acknowledge them, they connect to you. And again, it was another thing, you said it earlier, about placing yourself in a zone of discomfort or something you're just not used to is what expands you.
That was what activated another dimension of reality to me. Once you taste it, once you get a smell for it, once you feel that in the somatic essence of my being to be a reality, my curiosity kicked in, and that sparked me on a journey.
Hi, welcome to my think tank, a platform developed for lively discussions and debates. Here I bring together friends, colleagues, and experts to delve into some of the most relevant matters of culture, science, and spirituality. The format is a conversation platform. Through deep conversations and consideration of different perspectives and ideas, we aim to broaden our understanding of various topics and tackle some solutions to the challenges facing our world. We hope you will benefit by being on this journey with us as part of our growing community of truth seekers. So without further ado, let's meet today's guest. I am so excited to be here with my very good friend, Blu of Earth. And she came here with her Indiana Jones hat today, which was a special message for me because she's going to be coming to Egypt also, hopefully on one of our trips. And I told her she's got to bring this hat with her. But Blu is an amazing human being who is not only a podcaster extraordinaire, she's an incredible artist. She is a spiritualist. She was in the Air Force even. She's been in so many different situations, and she has royal blood too, which, I tease her about the whole bloodline thing. But she's a fantastic person and human being, and I'm so thrilled to have you here with me today, Blu.
Thanks for having me. And of course I had to wear my Indiana Jones getup. I was like, I'm going to go see Robert today. What feels appropriate? And everything that was Indiana Jones-ish in my closet was screaming at me. So
well, we almost kind of match.
Same color
it's
palette
kind of
and
funny.
everything. Yeah.
It's like opposite, just it is similar color palette. Wow.
Telepathy's a real thing. I just pinged you telepathically.
It's incredible. It is incredible. So when I asked you, like, you wore this getup, it looks like you're ready to go on safari or go to Egypt on one of my trips or whatever. And then you said something to me that I thought was so cool. And you said, I'm embodying Blue Daddy. And I want you to explain that. What does Blue Daddy mean to you exactly?
I love that this is your first question.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's go right to the real stuff.
That's right.
What is Blue Daddy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Blue Daddy for me is tapping more into my masculine energy. As an artist, as a woman, I can really soften into my feminine principle. The receptivity, the flow, the listening, the intuition, the art that flows through me, the spoken word. That's all fair and well. And my default has settled in that for so long that I'm starting to realize that structure is the answer to freedom.
Structure is the answer to freedom.
Because without structure, even magic can't be born here in the 3D plane.
Ooh.
And so
That's
structure
deep.
is the masculine energy. Structure is the infrastructure, the container, the thing that holds the feminine essence. And so Blue Daddy is the blue essence of who I am, tapping into the archetype of my masculine energy to allow myself to build the necessary structures so that my feminine energy can flow and I can soften deeper into a level of freedom because the structures are set in place.
That's fascinating. So do you think this is something that the whole world could benefit from, understanding maybe a little bit more of, especially for the feminine side? Because I think the masculine needs to probably have a pink mama side, right? But I like where you're going with this because it's showing the balance that you recognize and the importance of that balance to being able to both manifest and embody who, being the change that you want to see in the world as well.
Yeah, I think that first and foremost, I don't want to say like a blanket statement like everybody. And at the same time, everybody does have the left and the right hemispheres of the brain. And when you break down the left and the right hemispheres of the brain, you have the masculine and the feminine principle. Now, when you see the pineal gland, that is the place where we have access to see beyond the illusion, beyond the veil. So this is the awakened state. And if we're looking at the awakened state, where does the pineal gland sit? Right smack bang in the middle of the left and the right hemispheres of the brain, the masculine and the feminine. So to be able to actually create a life by design, I believe that we get to be curious to find out how to create a balance within the masculine and the feminine principles within our own being. Now, when I talk about masculine and feminine principles, I'm not talking about man and woman. You can have a man, like a male in a male body, however, more feminine energy. Mm-hmm. So it's not about, well, I'm a man, so I should have masculine energy. It's more so a recognition of where does my energy lie within my masculine, my feminine principles, and how can I find a balance by doing the things that I don't love with 200% if I do the things that I love with 100%.
See, and that's part of why I got, in a positive way, triggered by Blue Daddy. Because blue is traditionally known as a feminine color. Mm-hmm. So it's like feminine daddy, right? And so I like the paradox of it. And I definitely think that there's some deep wisdom in what you're saying about this. And have you always known this, or is this something that you've started to embody more of lately? Because you said you were driving on the way here. You're like, you got your coffee in one hand.
I'm having business meetings.
You got a business meeting. You're laying down some structure. Right.
And
You're like badass.
I'm like getting off on my own energy. Like, I'm like, yeah, empowered by my own energy doubled. Because I'm not doing Blue Daddy for anyone else. I'm doing Blue Daddy because it feels good to tap into an archetype that's not my default. And to enjoy playing in that realm. So for me, it's like, okay, if I want to create all of this beautiful art, if I want to make an oracle deck, if I want to build online courses, well, I need a website and I need the resources and I need to be able to structure my day so that I can actually carve out 2 hours out of my day to focus on this thing.
It's not easy being an influencer, is it?
I don't like to be an influencer. When someone calls me an influencer, I'm like,
I know,
oh,
I hate that too. I get
part of me
like,
dies
no.
just a little bit. I think of like influence, you know, like influence, But like, yes, I hear you. There are layers to it. However, if I really want to create a non-physical thing into a physical thing, which is the process of creation, there has to be structure. And the structure is the masculine principle.
Yeah.
So when I can tap into that masculine principle and know that structure equals freedom and discipline is actually being a disciple of my higher vision, then it actually becomes really fun. And the only thing to create sustainability within the balance of the masculine and feminine principles is to infuse joy and fun into it, as opposed to I should be doing this because if I don't, I'm less than. That's not sustainable. But to actually be like driving in the car, drinking my coffee, having the business meeting, setting the systems into place so that I can actually create and allow my art to be birthed into the 3D, into this plane and dimension, and I'm having a really good time doing it, then all of a sudden it's sustainable and I'm renegotiating my relationship with different archetypes within my being.
It's fascinating. You have, since the moment I met you, you have this ability somehow, I can tell, that you're putting pieces of a puzzle together in everything you do and everywhere you go.
Likewise.
Yeah, yes, I mean, we're kind of very similar in this regard. And you connect people. You've connected me to many people that now are taking an increasing piece of real estate in my time space continuum, right? And have you always been that way?
I navigate the world through my extrasensory perception. I don't hear everything. I'm hard of hearing in both my ears. That's a whole journey in itself. And Albert Einstein talks about how energy is not created nor destroyed, it's only changed in form. So if I'm not hearing everything, my sense of feeling is exponentially heightened. And so when there's a sense that's been deprived, awareness spirals inwards. And when the awareness spirals inwards and you're operating from this place, you start to navigate the world beyond appearance. Mm-hmm. And most of us are reliant on our five senses. So we receive the person in front of us by face value. And that face value, based off of what we've been taught success is how much money does that person have, how beautiful are they, what can they offer me, how much money does this person, or like how much impact do they have. So we start relating to people from this, and then we got caught up in really sticky situations that we didn't listen to our intuition because we actually had a red flag as soon as we met that person. Now, I am navigating the realm from feeling person's essence. And so when I feel somebody's essence, it doesn't matter what role they play. First and foremost, everybody just wants to be seen, heard, loved, and acknowledged. It doesn't matter what position they're in. When you can actually gift people that gift, then everywhere you go, doors will open, opportunities will present themselves. And if you're navigating the world through essence, then I will know that your essence will work with somebody else's essence, whether that essence is that person is a barista in Starbucks. It doesn't matter, because those two essences, there's chemistry there and something beautiful can be created. So it's so easy for me to know people based off of their essence and then be like, your essences work really well together, and I'll just let that one play out. And knowing that if we're all on the same team revolution of loving ourselves, ultimately.
It's like you're the spiritual Yentl.
Huh?
You're a spiritual Yentl. You know what a Yentl is? Like a matchmaker.
I love it. No one's ever called me that.
You're the spiritual, you're the gangster Yentl is what you are, the spiritual gangster Yentl. And you have this ability to connect people based on their energetics. And because you see them, you hear them, you love them, and you acknowledge them, they connect to you. And I think that's an equation. That's a math equation.
You could literally break it down to a mathematical equation.
See, hear, listen, right? And listen with empathy.
Don't just listen with your ears.
Yes. Don't just listen with your ears. Listen with your heart. Love them for who they are. That doesn't mean it has to be romantic. Love them for who they are and acknowledge them for their worth. And it's not based on any of those outside in things that you just mentioned.
Because none of that goes with you when you pass away anyway. And we're living in an infinite reality, not a finite reality, in the sense of, yes, it's finite in these physical beings, in these physical vessels, but it's infinite on a soul level. And so what we're actually moving through is we're burning off of karma. And we're believing that there's so much worth in physical things, but that physical thing is finite. It does not go with us. And so if we're placing our worth in these physical things in an infinite game of a soul, then we've still not quite learned the lesson that we came here to learn, which is not all that glitters is gold on a soul level.
Not all that glitters is gold. Can you explain that? Go deeper into that.
Celebrities are exciting. Money is exciting. Fancy clothes are exciting. Aesthetically beautiful humans are exciting. But it doesn't mean that it's infused with love. So it's glittery. From the five senses, ooh, that's exciting. I want a little bit of that. Oh, I want a little bit of their money. Oh, I want a little bit of their fame. Oh, I would like to get to this position. But when you actually get there and you're on the inside of it, it's hollow. It's like going to Disneyland and thinking that the door's open. It's like, oh, it looks all lovely from the outside, but the doors aren't even open. They're like not even real.
Yeah.
And so it's like we're walking through this illusionary hall of mirrors, mirage experience. And it's because we have become disconnected with actually feeling essence and become so reliant on our five senses. So for me to go into these realms, I had to lose a significant percentage of one of my senses and to no longer rely on just my five senses to perceive my reality, which is a reality of an illusion.
Fascinating. So have you always had this ability to tap into authenticity?
No. I played the role. I played the lights are on but nobody's home and living a life based off of shoulds. And what I mean by should is that somebody else has told me that this is their map of consciousness around what success is. Society's map of consciousness around what success is. So a living from shoulds is basically living somebody else's story and trying to make it fit for myself. And I look at photos of myself back then and I was a happy human. Like I've always had my soul imprint for the most part, and it was stories that were not based off of authenticity. And so I look at photos and it's like the lights are on, but no one's really home. And so it's been a really beautiful, long, patient journey of stripping away all the shoulds that have been projected on me since birth and to actually start living from the inside out, not from the outside in. And that is a journey in itself. And that's a hero's journey that all of us will embark on if we're curious enough.
Okay, let's rewind for a bit. Let's go back to Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
And why did you decide to do that? I'm guessing it was like a ROTC type of a program. Why did you decide to do that at that age in your life?
I don't feel like I had much of a choice. I went to a boarding school that was military based, so you have to be either in the Air Force or in the Army.
But why did you go to a boarding school that's military based?
I was sent there by my parents.
Okay, so your parents decided it for you.
Yeah.
So
and
you were going to be in the
this
military.
Is the best education they could give me.
This is the best education
They
could give
believe
you.
that this is the best education we give to our daughter. We're going to work our asses off to be able to afford to send her to this school so that she can have the best education and the best start.
Mm-hmm.
From their perspective, that was what they felt like was best for me. And as part of that school, you had to choose either the Air Force or the Army to do 2 years of service. And I chose the Air Force because the Air Force, you could fly planes. The Army, you're like, you know, getting in the dirt and doing night ops. We did that in the Air Force too, but not as much. But what I loved about the Air Force is that the potential that I was going to, by the second year, be able to fly my own plane. And
that's pretty badass.
It was really badass.
That's Blue Daddy.
That's Blue Daddy in the house. Blue Daddy was flying loop-de-loops. Like,
really?
Straight up would fly.
What type of plane did you fly?
It was just a
single
tutor
engine
plane. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
And it was a twin engine, and
twin
we
engine.
had like the two controls
cockpit.
on either
Mm-hmm.
side.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would never be the main pilot. I didn't do takeoff and landings. That was a third year training. However, I would go and fly with a main pilot as the co-pilot, and then they would hand the controls over to me once we were in the air, and then that's when we would do the tricks and the things that we would learn about the plane.
You know, it was crazy for me. I learned how to be a pilot.
You
as
did?
Well. I did.
I'm not surprised.
And you know, I always had these dreams of like, what if I remember I was on a trip to Turks and Caicos, mm-hmm. and we had to take this puddle jumper flight with this guy that was like hugely obese, and he's the pilot, and me and my ex-wife at the time, we're in the plane, and we're like, what happens if he has a heart attack? And it was a single engine plane, you know, and we're like, we'd be dead. So that's when I got pilot lessons on how to be a pilot.
I mean, it's a fair statement. You're just making sure that you're eliminating
I'm like, either
as many risks as
either
possible.
I like adventure travel, and you know, I'm going to continue on with it. And you know, one time I did this trip to Botswana, and I did 2 weeks on horseback in Botswana with 2 other friends. And the next week after we left, the plane that had flown us in on the puddle jumper had caught fire, and it was a tragic story. I mean, incredibly tragic story. Everyone unfortunately perished in it, and something had happened with the pilot. So I was like, okay, I'm definitely going to learn how to be a pilot, right? So I took, you know, pilot training classes and everything. I never went to the whole process of getting the license, because the license is many hours. Many hours. And you have to continue up with it. It's like
every 6 years it gets renewed.
Yeah.
So for me, my hearing decreased, my eyesight decreased. There's no way that I'd be able to pass the test now. You have to have like really perfect
reviews on that. Yeah. Absolutely.
And it's every 6 years to renew the license.
So I did it at Ventura Airport, and it was nuts because the guy said, okay, you're going to watch this video, and then you're going to fly the plane. I'm like, but you're going to take it off, right? And this is my first lesson. And he's like, no, you're going to fly the entire thing. So I had to take off.
You did take off.
Take off, fly it, and land it. It was like 2.5 hours we were in the air. And he's like, look, I'm not going to let myself die, so don't worry. I'm going to, So we get in the airplane, he hands me the key, and he says, okay, turn it on. I'm like, how? He's like, it's just like a car. So he's just like, turn it on. I was like, okay. And he kind of told me what to do, and I'd seen it in the video beforehand, and somehow I was able to do it.
Did you not do simulation beforehand?
No simulation,
you didn't
nothing.
Do flight simulation beforehand?
Nothing. I couldn't believe it. And then I did it a few more times. I was like, okay, I got this. If something were to happen, and I'm in an airplane, a puddle jumper, the guy has a heart attack, I'll know what to do at least.
Or we get hit with a zombie apocalypse, and we're like, does anybody around here know how to fly a plane? I'm like, listen, I'm hard of hearing. You might want to go with Robert this time.
That's right. That's right.
Perfect.
So I learned, and it was not as difficult as I thought it would be. Mm-hmm. And it was very fun. Mm-hmm. So I can imagine, I didn't do any loops and stuff like that, like you were doing, like acrobatics and stuff like that. But I was, I really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it was another thing, you said it earlier, about placing yourself in a zone of discomfort or something you're just not used to is what expands you
Mm-hmm.
a lot.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably what you find with all your podcasts too, because you meet so many people and have to talk about so many different topics that you're probably not as interested in as they are. Right. And I know that was probably true with me because like I'm interested in math and you're like, what the hell?
Listen, I have so much appreciation when you run with the numbers. And at the same time, I'm like, I have no idea what this dude's talking about. But it's so beautiful and it's expanding my capacity to have such a deeper understanding of mathematical equations and how they go hand in hand with a different way of looking at it, but they're actually pointing to the same thing. And I have so much appreciation for it. And at the same time, I'm not going to be afraid to be like, that's a lot of numbers there, Robert. Like, I don't know really what you're talking about, but it sounds brilliant.
Yeah. Well, I see something. I'm going to ask you a question about this little cross you've got.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very special cross. It has very deep significance to me because that is the prime number pattern. Okay. So you wouldn't even think of that. That would be the abstract form of this material cross that you have around your neck, but it actually represents the prime number pattern on a Mod 24 wheel, which I discovered and published in 2019. But what is it for our viewers? It's called the Maltese Cross, but I'll let you explain what the Maltese Cross means to you.
So my father's Maltese, and I'm 33% Maltese. And I recently was really in the contemplation of what does it mean to sit in ceremony and call your ancestors in? Like to sit in a circle, whether it's an ayahuasca ceremony or sitting in a meditation and you evoke your ancestors. Okay, well, I have a relationship with my English ancestors. I was born and raised in the UK. I was surrounded by my mother's family. It was all English. And so I have a deep connection to my ancestry on the English side. However, when I would call in my father's side, the Faroujas, I didn't know who I was calling in. I had no affiliation with Malta. And I started to dig a little bit deeper into it, and I realized that Malta specifically is one of the first places of the origin of magic that was documented. And Malta has the oldest temples in the entire world to date.
Yeah, there's some awesome megalithic sites there.
Incredible temples. And so I was sitting in front of my altar and I was in prayer, and it became very clearly to me, you need to go back to Malta. You need to go reconnect to that side of your ancestry, that your father's lineage. 50% of your being is this blood that when you call in your ancestors, there's the disconnect that's happening to your own personal power. And within a couple of days, I got a text message from Matthias De Stefano, by the way, who's a new friend of yours. And
because of you, thank you.
You are welcome. And he said, I've got a ticket to Malta. Two of my friends can't make it this last minute. If I can transfer the name of the ticket over, would you like to go? And I was like, well, I just got the message I was supposed to go to Malta. And then, of course, right on time, here he shows up with this ticket to Malta. But I was like, I don't think you can actually transfer the name over. So he tried, he couldn't. I've met Matthias, I've hung out with him twice, once on a podcast, once in a group setting. That's it. And it's very out there for me to say this, but I was like, well, if you do end up going, if you need a friend, let me know, I'll come with you. And he was like, yeah, if you want to do it, cool. The next day, excuse my French, I booked my ticket and I just wrote to him saying, what the fuck are we doing? And he was like, I don't know, but I think it's divinely guided. And so I ended up inviting my best friend, Reggie. We went to Malta for the week. And we went around the island, went to all of the sacred sites, and we opened up portals casually.
We did Hagar Kim, I'm sure, and Gozo Island and all that.
We did the Gozo Island. We did all of the sacred points. We went to all the sacred sites. And to wrap it up for the end of the trip, I reconnected to my blood family for the first time in 20 years, and we all went to have lunch with them. And I just was like in tears. Those two were witnessing me reconnect to the 50% of myself that I was severed from for a long time. And not only that, but the deep roots and connection to the Maltese lineage and the richness of Malta and the connection to Sirius, the connection to different star nations, the vibration of the island itself, and the magic, the deep-rooted magic that was very evident for me from start to finish. The fact that I got to share it with Matthias and Reggie, and at the same time, like right when I was wrapping up the trip, I decided to get myself a Maltese Cross as a representation for me to always remember that part of myself. And since I came back, there's like a power that's been activated within me, and unapologetic essence that is being distilled inside of me that I don't think would have been possible if I hadn't gone and done that trip. So this is a reminder for me of the true power of the essence of who I am when we understand our ancestry and where we came from.
So I'll give you a little bit more from the scientific perspective on the meaning of the Maltese Cross. And maybe you know some of this, maybe you don't know some of it. But it is the exact shape of a photon of light. Mm. So there have been photographs taken of photons, and the photon, the very first photon that was taken a photograph of, is exactly the shape of the Maltese Cross. So that has a very big significance in and of itself. And of course, it has 8 points. Those 8 points represent light.
I got shivers all over.
Mm-hmm. Those 8 points represent light. Also represents an entrance into Christ consciousness. It's the 8, 8, 8, 8. There's 4 8s that you could be ascribed around that. The reason I even discovered it in the mathematical form that it takes is because I was trying to understand the difference between radiation and gravity. And you could translate radiation and gravity into radiation being freedom and gravity being love. So love and freedom.
So Charlotte, my birth name, means to be free. And blue stands for beauty, love, and unity.
Of course. So the thing is with this, what I found was that and when you place it on a 24-hour clock, the pattern emerges. All prime numbers show up in the spokes of the first spoke, the fifth spoke, the seventh spoke, the 11th spoke, the 13th spoke, the 17th, and the 19th, and the 23rd spoke. Mm-hmm. All prime numbers show up in exactly those positions, infinitely, just going out as a spiral from there, right? From that, you can predict prime numbers. And this, I think, is the threshold knowledge for going into the higher dimensions of experience, which is where we are now. We're starting now to go into a higher fifth dimensional experience, which is, to me, it represents, and I wrote this recently, I believe that enlightenment is when the expression of love supersedes the desire for truth. Mm-hmm. And there's a paradox already inherently inside that. It's not that love supersedes truth, because in a larger sense, love is truth. Love is truth. What it meant to me was that it supersedes the desire for truth. And whatever it is that we want, right, that we desire, that we place on some vision board outside of us and separate from us and say, I want that thing, it only becomes more elusive to us. We can't actually grasp it because we're trying to grasp it. The way to have it is to embody it and to express it, right? If you want love, then express love, and love will find you. Instead of continuing to desire to find that love, you won't find that love.
Because you fall into the illusion that we're separate of it.
Exactly.
The universe does not give you what you want. The universe gives you who you are.
Right. And we don't see the universe as it is. We see it as we are. Mm-hmm. And so the way we see it becomes what we experience over and over and over again. That's how we attract everything we judge until we no longer judge everything we attract. So you seem to have grasped these concepts at a very, very young age. So let's go back for a moment to when you were in the Air Force and you did this, after your 2 years, then what happened? When did you start going into a spiritual path? Because that had to have been a very disciplined, I mean, I've seen the video you did where it's like you could, make your bed and bounce a quarter or something off of it. And, so it's so tight, right? And I know you have that aspect of you as well. There's a discipline side of it. It's the blue daddy aspect of you. So, but how did you translate that almost strict background into such a heart center that you now are?
That's been a life's work, not a season, for sure. And it continues to unravel and understand what that really looks like for me. However, I would say that I've not always been spiritual. It's not been the frame that has really supported me. It's been a journey of asking the deeper questions because I was posed with the experience that nothing's guaranteed. When my hearing started to decrease, I started asking the deeper questions because something was no longer guaranteed. I was no longer necessarily guaranteed to hear the world. I was no longer necessarily going to hear music or be able to hear my own voice when I sing. And so on that journey of really starting to ask the deeper questions, that was when I started to look at alternative paths of healing. And alternative paths of healing was also going down the plant medicine path and understanding like altered states of consciousness that exist. And I remember sitting with mushrooms for the first time, and magic mushrooms, and being out in nature and actually realizing that when I saw a tree, what I had studied in the past with a tree was it's got a tree trunk and it has roots and it has branches and it has leaves, and this is a tree. Now that's still seeing the world through the mind. But when you actually see the world through the heart, when I looked at a tree, now I actually realized that it's a living, breathing organism that is constantly communicating with us, that is now in direct connection with the mycelium network that is underneath every single footprint, like the neural networks of the brain or the internet network is also on this planet communicating with each other. And that tree communicates with this tree that communicates with me, that then creates this reciprocity, recognizing I'm no separate from nature. So that is now seeing the world from the heart. So the mind will go, well, this is what I read in a textbook about what the tree is. And the heart goes, oh my goodness, I am that tree. I am directly interconnected. And so once I started to actually peel back the layer of everything I have been told from the mind and actually what I'm operating from the heart, because I'm realizing that I'm now operating in a reality where my senses are not given to me, that this is something that I'm learning to navigate the extrasensory perception. That was what activated another dimension of reality to me. Once you taste it, once you get a smell for it, once you feel that in the somatic essence of my being to be a reality, my curiosity kicked in, and that sparked me on a journey. 10 years later, I am constantly in the inquiry of what is it, does it actually mean to be human? Like the fact that we're floating on a giant rock, hurling through space, held into orbit by a huge ball of fire, rotating on an axis. And I'm sitting here worrying about my taxes? Like, what is happening? Like, there's got to be something beyond what I have been told my entire life going on here in this reality of infinite possibilities as a multidimensional being that has an infinite soul that is finite in this physical body, but has memory from past lives that I am remembering in this life, which is allowing me to have access to a level of mastery that is so far beyond this life. If you just look at the stars at night and see the infinite vastness of where we live, how can you not believe in magic?
Totally.
It's so beautiful, and it's right here, hidden in plain sight this whole time. And yet we've kind of got these blinders on that's not allowing us to see, because we're thinking that life is just a given and I am living the reality that somebody else has told me. So by my nature, by my very design, I am all Scorpio and Aquarian, like, and a little Leo, if you can't already tell. Like, I am here to ask the deeper question. This is why I'm friends with you. This is why we have such fascinating conversations as an artist and a mathematician. Because we're both curious enough to peel back the layers of everything we've ever been told up until this point. And that's always my invitation with anything I ever share, anything I ever talk about, is that if you are a living, breathing human with a brain and a heart that works, you have something in you that not another person on this planet can do. There is something unique to you that is just like your fingerprint, that is the service that moves through your body and through your being, that is connected to an infinite source that created everything that cannot be named. And if you are not curious enough to find it, you will never find it. But we must be curious enough to ask the questions and ask why, as opposed to just believing that things are the way that they are. And when we get curious enough, we're going to start actually attracting our tribe. We're going to align with like-minded individuals that are all pointing to the same thing from a place of empowerment with their own unique flavor. You represent a different chakra to me, but we're in the same system. And when we come together, that system lights up all the way up to the crown. And when enough people start doing this, we're going to see a collective shift on the planet. But our individual contribution, our vibratory state, is our contribution to the collective mind. So when you wake up and start doing things differently, you are serving the future generations to come. And that's why I believe it's going to take all of us. It doesn't matter what position you're in, it doesn't matter what job you do, it doesn't matter what body you're in, it doesn't matter what skill set you have, it doesn't matter what background you came from. If you can get curious enough to ask why and genuinely start believing that there's something very special about you, watch the universe respond to more of who you become.
That's deep.
We ride deep. Let's go. I walked in here and you showed me the sacred geometry of how we can access collectively into the 5 dimension. Don't tell me that you don't do deep.
I do deep.
Deep is your default. And deep is the default probably of the people that are listening to this, because they found you based off of a curiosity to find out more about what it means to be human.
It's so beautiful. And just listening to you makes me emotional.
I have a way of making you cry.
You do. I don't know. It's the passion that you have behind it that's it's very powerful to me. It's very powerful. And to experience blue is to experience this voice, and that's why your name is so perfectly named, because blue is the throat chakra. And you have this voice that is beyond. I don't think I've ever heard anything like it. When you sing, it's like, wow. And where does that come from?
I don't hear my own voice. I feel it. My ears don't allow me to hear sound like everybody else hears it, what I would presume. However, sound, music is vibration, and you've been breaking this down. It all comes down to vibration. Everything is vibration. We operate in a vibratory reality. So when I sing, I feel it from the inside of my body as like a vibrational box that emanates out of every 75 trillion cells of my body through the pores of my being and then out into the space. And so if I can align my intention and my heart with my voice and to not hear it but feel it, it holds a certain charge that will make people feel something. And so that's the difference between prayer and performance. I don't sing to perform. I sing to pray. It's my prayer. And it just so happens to be when I'm in an empty church and the acoustics are surrounded by incredible artwork that just emanates off the walls. It holds like another worldly presence to it. But it all comes down to feeling and it being medicine for me. And what I mean by medicine is that when I didn't know if I would be able to sing anymore, that was like crushing for me with the potential of going deaf. And when I actually learned about Beethoven and how he was 100% deaf, and he created music that lasted way beyond his lifetime. And he would put his third eye to the piano and saw the feet off the piano so that the vibration would move through his body. And that's how he would create music that lasted eons after he passed away. And because it made people feel something. He heard music through feeling. And that's what created the charge around it. And so to one man or one person, oh my goodness, losing your hearing is the worst thing that could ever happen. What would it be like if I shifted the narrative that it could have been the best thing that could have ever happened to me? Possibly. If I tell myself that story, then purely, if I genuinely believe it, the universe has to reflect that back. So then fast forward to me standing in an empty church and just letting something move through my being and it touching the hearts of other people. It's introducing us into another dimension of sound.
Yeah. That also very deeply resonates for me. I feel like your voice has been activated in profound ways because of your deafness. Mm-hmm. And what a gift. Mm-hmm. And I think life is about that, because most people might look at that in a very different way, mm-hmm. which is, woe is me, I lost my hearing, I'm slipping off into the silence. And yet you're finding the divinity in the suffering, mm-hmm. and turning that pain and difficulty into purpose. What do you think your purpose is?
I believe my purpose is to be that which is needed in every moment.
That which is needed.
Needed. Some may call me a witch, but I would say I'm that which.
That which
is needed. And to understand that which
You've
is
said
needed.
that many times to me.
It changed everything for me, because based off of, I don't know, Christian or religious indoctrination or way of seeing life, it would be easy to look at me and call me a witch because I'm into working with the elements,
You
or
kind
have
of
an
are.
altar.
You have altars and
or,
stuff.
like,
You do
know,
all the witchy type
crystals
stuff.
and all the things.
Yeah, you got it all. You got the woke hat. Although I don't think this qualifies as a woke hat.
This is
Indiana
Blue
Jones.
This is my
It's a
Blue
Blue
Daddy
hat. It's not a woke hat.
No.
You have a woke hat, though. I've seen you in another hat. That's not the same.
I have all the things. I have all the archetypal expressions.
That's right.
Because I'm that which is needed. I wake up in the morning and I open my closet and I go, okay, what's the energy that's running through me today? Because there are 64 archetypes. There are 64 codons in my DNA. There's 64 lenses I can see my life through. Today I could be Blue Daddy. I'm more in my masculine. Today I could be feeling like a floaty gown and a dress. I'm more in my feminine. Today I could be feeling so cheeky and silly like my eternal child. I'm going to tap into that and wear lots of bright colors. But my closet is a representation of all of the different expressions of the archetypes I've given myself permission to embody, that which is needed. My purpose is to listen deeply beyond my ears and in the entirety of my being to understand that which is needed and allow myself to be the medicine.
You know, it's one of those things. I remember when we first started talking around the time that I did a podcast with you, and I had memories of being in lifetimes where you were as well. And as in one case, I told you about it, you were a sister of mine. And I told you, I'm like, I see you playing like a reed of grass, like an instrument. And you were like, I do that all the time.
I do. Anytime I go on a walk and I find that perfect grass that's not too thick, not too thin, but it's a good length, you know I'm going to pick it and put it between my thumbs and be like, I play the grass instrument everywhere.
That was such a random thing.
So random.
I saw that. I'm like, this was a lifetime in Egypt. And I'm like, you were my sister. And you used to go to the reeds on the side of the riverbank and pull them and play them like a trumpet. And you're like, I do that all the time.
All the time.
I've never said that to another person
really
in my
random.
entire life.
It's really random. It's very, very niche.
It's very specific, right? Very specific. And you were always a jokester. And you kind of still are. And that's one of the things that's like so interesting and delightful about how your personality is. Mm-hmm. You disarm people. I think you are a master at self-awareness. Of all things, I would say that's the thing that you probably possess above anything else, is that whole notion that you just said, you know, being able to see, hear, listen, love them, and acknowledge. You do that with everyone. It's a real, real blessing. It doesn't matter who they are. And you don't differentiate between someone who is, you know, the barista versus someone else. You do that with everyone. And I such admire that. I really do. And so what do you think it's going to take to get more people to embody the change they want to see in the world?
I think that it starts at the microcosm level of, if we can understand the formula that every single person wants to be seen, heard, respected, appreciated. Well, first and foremost, it's got to start within ourselves. So how can we transcend this binary experience of there being a right and a wrong? That's a deep one. That runs so deep. That's in all the great religions. You're either going to go to heaven or you're going to go to hell. You do the right or you do the wrong. Totally. If you do this, you're good. If you do this, you're bad. Okay, so there's this like belief system in place in the fundamental decision making of the construct of my mind that says, if I do this, this is good. If I do this, this is bad. So no longer do I have a teacher or a parent or society at large projecting onto me what's good and bad. I'm doing it myself. So I'm keeping myself in an invisible cage of right and wrong, constantly either judging myself or validating myself and oscillating in this pendulum of swinging of like being in this self-judgment. Now, if I'm judging myself based off of every single action I do, whether it's right or wrong, how I'm going to judge you if you're going to be doing right or wrong? Because I can only give you what I give to myself.
Yeah.
So if I can unlock myself from the cage of a binary belief that there is a fundamental right and a wrong, and to start actually exercising a new way of operating, which is the most sacred thing is what is, and recognizing the discernment of that that's enriching and that that's depleting, and constantly choosing discernment of that that's enriching my spirit, then I'm freeing myself of this cage of judgment. So I'm therefore freeing you of this cage of a judgment, because I can only love you the capacity in which I love myself. And if I can love myself for the times when I'm not feeling happy, when the times when I'm feeling jealous or angry or sad or am in grief, and I can actually infuse some self-love and acceptance into those moments, then all of a sudden I'm going to be somebody that can make someone feel seen and loved and heard and appreciated, because I'm doing it for myself. When I'm sad, when I'm heartbroken, when I don't have any hope in that moment, and I'm allowing my body to soften into that truth that it's okay. And I do that over and over and over again, and become the mother and the father of my own experience. And I become the shaman and the medicine woman and the healer of my own experience. I can give that to you from a genuine place. And so I think that this is an internal quest that will reflect outward. It's the you inverse, as you speak of. But the you inverse is actually giving myself the permission to not judge myself today, and to trust that the most sacred thing is what is. And if I'm feeling jealous, that has a sacred purpose. If I'm feeling sad, that has a sacred purpose. And when I soften deeper into it, like Richard Rudd says, enlightenment or awakening is a series of softenings.
A series of softenings.
If I can soften in the challenging emotions, I can definitely love you more.
It does come down to the self-love. It's funny because what we were talking about right before this was I was showing you on the whiteboard the conclusion, without going into all the math details of it. The conclusion I had, which you saw had 2 big exclamation points behind it.
You were so excited when you wrote that.
Yeah, was that the radius, which is interesting because radius is derived from Ra, god of the sun, which represents the persona. The Ra Deus, Deus means God. Radius or Ra Deus is the sun god, or think of it as your persona. From the radius, you can derive all higher dimensions in its infinite complexity simply from a radius of 1. And I think that says so much, because we tend to seek solutions in the outside world, right? We all do. I have definitely been that, more than someone who was inside out. I've become more inside up oriented than I have been in the past, but I was definitely outside in for most of the arc of my life. But the answers are all within. And we tend to go through the spiritual path. It's like that Chinese proverb that says, the man who blames others has a long way to go in his journey. The man who blames himself is halfway there, and the man who blames no one has already arrived.
Which is the person that has transcended the binary experience that there's a right and a wrong, which is the key to freedom.
Absolutely. And so we get to the stage often through the middle of our spiritual journey. We think we've arrived in a way. And this is usually the point where you sort of like completely want nothing to do with your prior self, because you're kind of blaming that prior self for all the woes that you face and challenge, right? All those things that were difficult in life. And so it's like, I want to put it away. If you're Jim Carrey, I'm the actor who was once known as Jim Carrey type of thing. But actually, the true enlightenment path is to recognize the value of that persona. That the conditioning biases that create your unique eyes of vision are actually what informs the universe so that it can expand. That has a purpose. That all the pain you experienced actually had purpose. I teach math. And
you do?
People hate math. I mean, like, of all subjects, people hate math. Let's be real. They hate math. And yet it's the foundational basis of all that is, right? There are people that love math. I'm not going to argue with that. There are. But a lot of people had bad experiences with it when they were in junior high and high school, and they're like, F that. No thanks. Well, that's because they learned math that had no meaning. Math without meaning is just information. But math with meaning becomes spiritual progression. It becomes divinity. It's divine expression. And so we start to realize why things are the way they are, then we can get into the mind of source consciousness. And that source consciousness allows us to feel the empathy of what he, she, or she, he did in creating this universe, and that she, he is not separate from you. They are you. You're just a vision of that one value, or radius of one. And to me, that's such a powerful thing that it allows us to be able to see things, just as you said, your deafness, for example, becoming a divine gift of this exponentially powerful, empowered voice as a result, probably, of your deafness. You had to lean on other aspects, right? Your throat chakra had to become more accentuated in some ways to be able to deal with the world around you and the pain that you're experiencing. You had to process it differently. Mm-hmm. And that led to beautiful revelations and expressions that come out in your life every day. You know, I think of this when I think of Helen Keller. Helen Keller, I mean, she was practically quadriplegic. She was deaf and blind. And yet she inspired millions and tens of millions of human beings, and still does today, to this day. And so if she had just been not having faced all those ailments, would we even know who she was at a collective level? Maybe not. Maybe, because it was still a powerful voice. But that's the context with which humanity has now placed that learning to upgrade our own consciousness. Mm-hmm. So how do we turn that into brass tacks and blue daddy style? I said zaddy. Blue daddy style.
You love the blue daddy thing.
Yeah, I do. I love the blue daddy thing. How do you turn that into a blue daddy manifestation? So yes, it's self-love, but what does that mean? Do you stand in front of the mirror and go, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself?
It's a hero's journey that happens on a microcosm moment, in the moment when the thought comes up. Can you give yourself just a space to question that thought, as opposed to just believe it as face value as truth? There's any thought that presents itself that says it's rooted in a disempowering nature, what would it look like to actually question it and to not take it as truth?
So give me an example of that. So let's say you have a negative self-narrative, right? A negative self-narrative, because people all do it. I can't do this.
Okay.
Right? I'm not good at math. I can't do math.
Well, imagine the genie just pops out and goes, your wish is my command. Okay, then you are not good at math. Because your language holds a vibrational charge that in a vibrational reality has to bring back more of that you're emanating. So, confirmation bias, if your story is that you cannot do something, then you will not be able to do it. Every single thing that is in creation was once a thought. So, if I think my hearing loss holds within it a seed of my greatest service to the planet, well, your wish is my command. Yes, it is. If my thought says, this is the worst thing that could ever happen to me, then that's all I'm going to see around me is evident that that is the truth. If I want to buy a white Honda Civic and I'm looking on the internet for white Honda Civics everywhere, all of a sudden I'm driving over down to Laguna Beach and I see at least 10 white Honda Civics on the way over here because it's in the forefront of my consciousness. Same with our thoughts and our words. If we understood that every single word we say holds a vibrational charge that sends out to the universe and like a boomerang has to bring us more of that we're emanating, we would never speak a word of what we hate again.
So true.
You will never hear me talk about things that I hate. I may feel like I don't like it. It may feel uncomfortable in my system, but because I understand the power of my spelling, my spell casting with my words, I do not focus on things I don't like. It is so hard to be around someone that's negative. But of course, if I'm already feeling repelled by what that person is saying, imagine the universe trying to give the gifts that that person wants. It's impossible. It's a repellent. It's like two magnets that are repelling each other. So from the second we wake up, we think on average around 60,000 thoughts a day. And it's going to be cumbersome to start shifting those thoughts. But most people are predominantly operating from a negative 60,000 thoughts a day. They're majority not empowering thoughts. Of course, we're set up in a world and society that is deeming us unworthy from the moment that we're born, deeming us as sinners just for being alive. And so we are at spiritual warfare with a giant business, which is the United States, which profits off people's unworthiness.
Okay, let's go into that. So you said something before we started this discussion about consumerism and really profiting off of unworthiness. And I was interested because you didn't say capitalism, you said consumerism. Two very different things. But I'd love to hear you expand on that thought of consumerism.
I believe consumerism is a byproduct of a deep unworthiness within ourselves, thinking that the more that we have, the less unworthy we'll feel, which is a complete lie. It's one of the biggest lies that run this planet right now, and it's one of the biggest lies that is contributing to the deforestation of the Amazon jungle. Our lungs of this planet. We are literally killing ourselves with our unworthiness. We're killing this planet with our unworthiness. The planet, like the earth, is our body. The air is our breath. The water is our blood. The fire is our spirit. And there is not this disconnect, but we've become so disconnected from it because we're fed this unworthiness. And of course, unworthiness is the most profitable business there is. How many businesses run off of our unworthiness? Whether it's the beauty business, whether it's the spiritual business, whether it's clothing or makeup or Botox or like breast implants, like all of this is stemmed from unworthiness. And multi-billion-dollar businesses. The amount of profit that comes from people feeling inherently unworthy is the reason why we're constantly purchasing on Amazon Prime. It's ironic that it's called Amazon Prime, one of the biggest contributions to deforestation of the Amazon jungle. Amazon and Amazon. Like it's crazy how in our sight it is. But it's just like, oh, I feel this like unworthiness inside of me. Maybe if I buy this thing, or maybe if I get more clothes, or maybe if I get this thing. And so it's like, it's this never-ending hungry ghost pandemic that we're experiencing on the planet. And authenticity, self-love, it doesn't matter if you're wearing a trash bag, but if you genuinely love it, if you're loving the people around you, you're becoming so magnetic that people will then start thinking that the trash bag's cool. It's cool at first. We're like, oh, it's Marino, look what she's wearing. But if she's claiming it, then all of a sudden it becomes cool. And it's because what we're really starved of is authenticity. What we're really starved of is a deep sense of self-love, just the way that we are. And so, of course, consumerism is a byproduct of feeling unworthy. It's a whole system. And at the end of the day, we can't eat money. We're not going to be able to have fish that live in our waters if we keep polluting the water because of the consumerism. So what happens? Our waters run dry. We don't have any food to eat. Our airs are polluted. But what, we're rich? Where are you going to spend your money? On what planet?
So, okay. So
I can go off on this.
All right. I'm sure you can. So when you think about this, how does that connect to this notion of non-judgment? Because these are areas that then get into the nuances, right? It's kind of the nuance of being able to transcend this concept of being locked, as you said, or caged by this concept of right and wrong. So how do you reconcile those two aspects? Because I fundamentally believe also that the things that we continue to judge are the things that keep showing up in our world. Because I actually, when you actually placed it the way you did and said it the way you did about we're on this hurtling rock, and I'm already thinking it's traveling 67,000 miles per hour.
Yeah, I knew you knew the
right?
number. I didn't want to say the number because he's
and spinning at 1,000 miles per hour. Okay, let's be real. So you start thinking about this, and you kind of realize the chance that all of this hurtling around at 67,000 miles an hour, which is the speed of light divided by 10,000. That's all it is. It's the speed of light divided by 10,000. So you start thinking, okay, so the speed of our planet going around is exactly tagged times 10 to the fourth power is the speed of light. Yeah, it is. That's so miraculous. Even the distances between the planets, 36 million miles for Mercury, 67 million miles, the same 67 for Venus. That's the speed of light in miles per hour, 67 million miles per hour. So when you start thinking about this, you kind of realize, wait a minute, this seems like a perfect merry-go-round clock. It's so perfect. And then I finally came to the realization that I was like, wait a minute, it's an illusion. It's not real. Now, I don't believe that the earth is flat, and a lot of people go into that concept. But I do believe that it could be very likely that we're sitting somewhere with some headset on, because everything is too perfect. Mathematically, it's all too perfect. And I know enough about the math to know that it's all too perfect. There's never a time where I cannot find and figure out a pattern. Never. Mm-hmm. It just takes longer time because I have to be able to zoom out to see, the larger perspective. Mm-hmm. So if that's the case, it's almost as if we're in some simulation that we're learning through opposites, and the things that we keep judging will continue just to keep showing up. So how do you reconcile that in that world?
Again, the judgment is operating from a binary experience of there being a right and a wrong. However, what I really want to focus on is inspiring people into their greatness. You never can shame someone out of changing.
No, that's true.
You can't shame someone to change.
Very true.
You're just going to create more of it. And also you're a part of the problem, because that judgment is the diminishing frequency, and the frequency is the contribution to the collective. So we're just continuing, if we don't end the wars in our own minds, we're going to continue to see wars on the planet.
And I loved when you said that. I think it was at Conscious Life Expo. And that was so powerful. I saw it on your Instagram stories, and I was like, damn. And I remember I reposted it because I was like, damn, that was good. And what you said that was so powerful to me is like, instead of going to wars, why don't we deal with our own shit inside of ourselves so we stop seeing the world that creates it as being like this? Mm-hmm. Can you expand on that? Mm-hmm.
Again, it comes back to what I was referring to before, which is from the moment that we wake up, we've got this narrative that's running in our heads. And it's, whose narrative is this? Is this my mother's narrative? From the first, 10 years of my life, I only knew myself through the eyes of my mother. So when I was doing good, my mother would say I was doing good. When I was doing bad, my mother would say that I was doing bad. So that I only knew myself through the eyes of the validation externally. That's why the mother-daughter, mother-son relationship is one of the most complex relationships there are, because we only know ourselves through the eyes of another being. Mm. So then, all of a sudden, when we're no longer living in the house with our parents, who becomes the judge? Us.
We do.
On ourselves. So if we're not clocking this, if we're not self-aware, if we don't have the awareness of what's going on internally, how we're speaking to ourselves, where did that story come from? Why do I have this belief system? Reframing the stories in our heads is the ultimate key to freedom.
Mm. That resonates deeply. Have you seen this television show that's out right now? I think it's on Netflix, and it's either Hulu or Netflix. It's called Jury Duty.
No, I haven't seen it.
You got to see this. So what it is they have all actors. And so, except one guy. One guy thinks he's going to a real jury, to be on a real jury, to serve on a jury, and everybody else there he thinks are all potential jurors. So they go through the entire process. There's a court, there's a bailiff, there's a judge, and everywhere they go is entirely staged. And the one guy that has actually done this sincerely has no clue that he's in a Matrix game. It's fascinating. It's like Truman Show, right? It's like totally Truman Show. He ends up becoming, like, he's a really nice guy. He ends up becoming the jury foreman, right? Like the top juror type of thing. And he's got to be the leader and everything. And at the very end of the case, and it was such a lame case. It was like, and there were so many weird things about it. It's kind of like when you go to the DMV. When you go to the DMV, you meet like all aspects of society, right? And you're like, whoa. So one of the guys in there was just like super strange. And he had pants that had he called them chants. And they were like, he had like a seat attached to his pants so that he could just stand. And then if he's waiting in line, just sit down on his pants, because they would have these two legs that would go back. And he would like sit down, and they were like, what are you doing? And he's trying to get them off while he gets into the jury box. It was hilarious. And they're like, what a weirdo, right? This guy's so bizarre. And he had like all kinds of weird stuff. They're like, okay, we have to get rid of your phones. Everyone's phones had to be taken away. Everyone's stuff, all their personal items. They couldn't be distracted by anything. And then they find out that he had a fake ear. That same guy with the pants, he had a fake ear, and you could pull off his ear, and it had like a recording device. It was hilarious. But at the very end of the show, the big reveal after the case is over and the guy is found to be not liable, not guilty, it was a civil case. The judge turns to him and says, by the way, I told you this was my last trial. And he looks at the guy who's not the paid actor, right? And he says, this was actually also my first trial. He said, I've never been a judge before. And so the guy's like, what? And so this is the reveal. He says, all of this has been fake. But you did a great job, right? And they gave him $100,000. But the look on his face is like, wait a minute. And the whole thing was filmed. When he signed up for it, he thought it was a real jury, and he didn't really read the fine print, which was in, all of the contract stuff that he signed, because they said they wanted to document the whole court proceeding. Now, I started thinking, of course, is it going to be like that when we die?
God gives you $100,000. I'm like, good job, you did that Earth thing. It was a bit weird along the way. You had some great time, met some cool people. It was a bit crunchy in like a lot of the spaces, but you know what? Here's $100,000. Congratulations.
Isn't that kind of funny?
It's hilarious. I really don't think God's going to hand us $100,000.
No, I don't think he's going to hand us $100,000, but I
do think there's going to be a little bit of a wake-up call.
A reckoning, which is like, it was all fake.
It's very convincing, though, isn't it?
It's extremely convincing.
Like if I karate chop my leg, it hurts. It's convincing. I'm like, I'm here.
Yes, because you have a belief system, right? Like we talked about on the podcast we did with Richard, where it's like, there's no reason. When you understand the context of space-time, and how my hand is literally replicating itself over and over and over again through space-time, through each cubic, aspect of space-time is being on-excitated versus off-excitated, and my hand is not really moving; it's being re-reflected each place. So therefore, I should be able to raise my frequency of my finger and pass it through the density of my hand. And by the way, it could be also true with levitation. It could be true with a lot of other things that we think that we are bound because of our beliefs. We don't realize that the only thing that's binding us, the anchor that holds us down, is our belief systems. The only real obstacles in this life and world are the obstacles that we continue to believe in persistently.
The U inverse.
The U inverse. So if you realize that you're in a game, could you play in that game? Hindus believe in this concept of Leela, which means you're in a game, you're in a matrix, and now you can play in that matrix because you've learned how to work the matrix. You've transcended it in a way. This afternoon, you're going to do a demo, right, of a game that my team has created, right? That's like this augmented reality thing. You got to see part of it. It's kind of cool, right? And we'll go outside, and you can open a portal anywhere you are into a different space-time dimension, and then play inside that world. It's like crazy cool, right? But that's just a metaphor for maybe what we could experience if we let go of the shackles of our own conditioning biases and belief systems. And that's what I believe. I believe humanity's on the verge of that. And we're seeing this because now more and more people are starting to do exactly what you said, which is to transcend the duality of learning through opposites. We're learning through opposites. We have to keep experiencing the same things over and over again until we no longer judge the negative aspect of those things. Does that resonate for you?
And then it just becomes what is.
And then it becomes the isness of is. And it's...
comes back to the number one.
It comes back to the number one.
Everything always does.
Everything comes back. We're all just divisions of the number one. And then one over our number, our own unique identifier. And thank you for connecting me with Richard as well, because I've already been working to solve the mathematical aspect of, the shadow, the gift, the city, and the golden thread. It's an equation because everything in this U inverse is. It must be. And that's what's so beautiful about it. So what do you see if you could dreamcast a little bit or see the future? You've got your witch crystal ball, that which is needed. and as an oracle, because I definitely see you as that. You are an oracle. So what do you see coming for what's happening in the world right now?
In my current reality, as I have done this deep excavation, asking the deeper question, continuing to infuse compassion into my tougher emotions that present themselves, the reality in which I am living in right now, there are 8 billion people on the planet. There's 8 billion different realities happening simultaneously. The reality I currently operate from, I feel an immense amount of hope and excitement about what's to come, while at the same time not just falling into the naivety of the amount of work that needs to be done on this planet to genuinely start to move beyond survival and suffering. That is also a very real reality for a lot of people. Wherever I look right now, I am seeing loving people. I am connecting and spending time with people that are asking the deeper questions, that are recognizing that we are stronger together than we are alone, that actually this archetype of the lone wolf isn't working anymore, and to come together and to share our offerings as opposed to what can I get from this, but what can I contribute, will always ensure abundance within that microcosm of humans. I'm starting to see people come together and to support each other from the mindset of when you win, I win. And so I believe that right now we are existing in a reality where it's like oil and water, and there are two worlds. There are those that are victim frequency, and there are those that are creator consciousness. And in the Gene Key 55, which is one we've talked about, we've broken down and studied and read the shadow of victimization, the gift and CD of freedom. So are you a victim of your life's experiences? Was I a victim of my hearing loss, or was I the creator of my hearing loss? Every single person on this planet has a challenge, an Achilles heel, their own version of their deafness. How you choose to see that as the victim of, or the creator of,
Or the victor.
the moving into the victory of your experience, will determine, which is my middle name, by the way, Victoria, victory, will determine...
I don't think people know your real name.
Some of the OGs.
Some of the OGs.
Will determine whether you operate in the oil or the water of the experience, of the planet, of the two different vibrations that are existing, but they're existing simultaneously. And I believe that when enough people start to actually become the creator, no longer victimized, of what is happening, then we're going to start to see a new world emerge. But of course, first and foremost, the old system has to collapse. Anything rotten at the foundation of a system that's put in place that is not honoring life has to, by the nature of evolution, collapse.
Yeah.
So we're seeing already.
It's
Banking
happening.
system,
It's happening all
just the
around
food,
us. Right?
everything, agriculture, like we're seeing it everywhere. And we're also seeing it within people. Like wherever you look, people are going through it. They're facing off with all their limiting beliefs. They're really in it. And I think we can't get enough.
I don't know
spaces.
anyone who's not going through a spiritual awakening right now. I honestly don't.
Yeah,
even people
evolving.
that were from my most reductionistic and conservative world prior to my spiritual awakening, they're all going through it.
Because they're on a planet that's evolving, whether they like it or not.
Yeah.
So we can't get enough safe spaces for people to be able to feel without judgment.
So do you see it as the world is going to continue to, there's going to be literally two types of mentalities. One is the victim mentality. One becomes the victor or sovereign mentality. And the way I kind of see it, though, is that tendency to be anchored in the 3D, right, which is very much a scarcity-based mentality. Very much the world is happening to me, not for me. And it becomes a right and wrong. It's a desire for truth. And no villain that ever existed ever thought they were a villain. They always thought they were the hero.
Everybody starts with a good intention.
Everyone starts with a good intention. I mean, it's like the whole thing with WEF. I kind of laugh at that because the people that are involved in that, right?
I don't know what that is.
It's like it's this group, the World Economic Forum, which is in Davos, that meets every year. And I've been invited to speak there. I've not accepted the opportunity to speak at those conferences. But the people that go to it are very much all about making improvements. but they don't understand that very often the way it can be perceived by the things they want to do, and it's not like their leader, Klaus Schwab, has done much to help that, because he literally looks like Emperor Palpatine. He dresses like Darth Vader. I mean, literally dresses like Darth Vader. So, I mean, that doesn't say enough, right? Because don't judge a book by its cover. But, I mean, you have to kind of go out of your way to get a look like rock the Darth Vader look or the Emperor Palpatine look in Star Wars. Mm-hmm. It's not easy. It's not easy to pull off. He does it, though. He somehow pulls it off. And there's like this whole very dystopian sounding agenda around it, right? And it's one of those things that I myself look at, I'm like, why? Because now when I experience these things on the outside, I stop and ask myself, why am I projecting this in my universe? Why is it showing up? Why is this seeming assault happening right now on, the questions of gender and everything? This whole battle that's going on between these two sides. And can we transcend out of this desire for truth and move into expression of love?
So there's the ticket right there, though. It's your curiosity to ask instead of just allowing it to be on autopilot. Mm-hmm. That's already separating you from victim frequency. Mm-hmm. The curiosity to ask why and the inquiry into a different way of doing things that's actually supporting life. That in itself is power. And so it's tapping you out of the mainstream, which just blindly follow.
So it's almost like the world will continue probably this path, because as the light gets brighter and brighter, the darkness that basically becomes the backdrop to that light becomes darker and darker. So it's like in all the great films, you've got Gandalf the Grey becomes Gandalf the White, but then you've got Sauron searching for the Ring of Power and orcs all over the place. Mm-hmm. And the two are equally balanced, because every action must have an equal opposite reaction. Mm-hmm. For people to ascend into the fifth dimension, some will have to descend into the second. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of an interesting concept. And so some people, and we could think of it like this, if the person that would be my counterpart on the opposite side of a spectrum didn't decide to anchor the third dimension and battle it out between the desire for truth, then I wouldn't be afforded the opportunity to ascend. So in some way, it's like if I came here to learn forgiveness and you were my friend in the prior world before coming here, and you might say, look, it's going to be a tough job, but I'll volunteer to be the person to do you wrong so that you can learn forgiveness.
Did you read the book that I gave you? That is the story of forgiveness.
That's the story.
Yeah. Is that somebody is going to have to do you wrong so that you know what forgiveness is, because without the wrong, how are you going to know what forgiveness even is?
Exactly.
And so we all play very crucial parts within all of it, but does that not breed the permission that there's perfection even amidst all of the what the fuck moments?
Exactly. And that's where I'm going. It's that turning pain into purpose through the series of, as Richard says, the series of softenings. Mm-hmm. Realization that the world is not stark black or white. It's a gradation of color, and that color is constantly expanding, and we're all just looking at different perspectives, and the sum of all possible subjective perspectives is probably the closest thing we could have ever to an objective truth. And the only truth behind it is, why does it all have to diffract into all these different spectrum of colors and experiences and facets, not facts? And maybe the only answer to that is love itself. Mm-hmm. That love is the only objective truth.
If you really, really want to be loaded with a superpower, love people as much as you can and watch incredible opportunities open themselves up to you. I've never once been asked what GPA I got in college. I just loved people. And so many remarkable opportunities that I could never have fathomed have presented themselves to me. It's the greatest superfood that exists. It is the best anti-aging product that's on the market. Love.
Love.
Every 75 trillion cells only have really 2 jobs: to listen and respond.
Did you know that every cell in your body turns over, goes through death, cell death, apoptosis? It goes through cell death at least once every 7 years. That means you're an entirely new person, every 7 years,
Oh
which is
yeah,
probably
look at
why
your passport photos.
probably why we have something called, the 7-year itch, right? In relationships.
Yeah.
And because you're entirely a new person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look at my old passport picture. I'm like, ooh, that bitch. Like, is that my facial structure changed? It looks like I've had surgery. I've never had surgery. Like, it literally looks like I've changed form, because every single thought, my cells are listening and responding and molding and becoming of that which I think I am.
I think of you in that video I saw of you in the Air Force with your hands behind your back doing a very British military thing. Yes, absolutely. And you do look entirely different.
I'm a different human. We're all molding and changing in a reality that the only constant thing is change, including our physical bodies. Like, oh, you change. Like, that's what we're supposed to do. We're evolving constantly.
It's my favorite meme, the one where it's like the butterfly reading the newspaper.
Yeah.
And then the caterpillar on the other side, and the caterpillar says, "Man, you changed." And the butterfly is like, "Yeah, we're supposed to."
Yeah. Yeah, we evolve. We change. There's no stagnancy in it. There's an opportunity to mold and shift and shape ourselves. And I've had reflections from people that have been angry that I only have good-looking people on my podcast. And it's like there's been jokes about like, oh, well, she must have this prerequisite that you've got to be a handsome or attractive person to come on the podcast. I'm like, no, these people live from their hearts.
That's what makes them attractive.
Huh?
That's probably what makes them attractive.
Well, yes, it's their vitality. Your teeth will become whiter. Your skin will become clearer when you love. It's so magnetic. It creates vitality in someone's body and being. And so it doesn't matter. And this is the shift that I must stand for, from artificial glamour to authentic beauty. It doesn't matter what physical vessel, flesh puppet, whatever you want to call it, that you incarnated into, this quantum computer of infinite capacity. It doesn't matter what you incarnated into. Artificial glamour will tell you that you are a beautiful person because of what you look like. Authentic beauty makes you a beautiful person based off of how much you love. So it doesn't matter what genetics you got.
It's the sexiest thing you can do.
It's so beautiful.
Love and self-love. Mm-hmm. True confidence. It does. It's like it, as they say in German, macht sexy. Makes sexy. Mm-hmm. It definitely changes the way you will be perceived because you have changed the way you perceive yourself.
Mm-hmm. It's the greatest gift you can ever give yourself, because self-awareness is the one thing that can never be taken away from you. You know, your money may fluctuate in your bank account. The car you drive may get a fender bender and you have to get traded in. Your relationship with your family, your relationship with your friends, your relationship with your partner, that's all going to fluctuate and change. But self-awareness stays with you for the rest of your life. You get to hold on to it and beyond. It's the greatest investment we could ever make, is to understand our own emotions and start asking ourselves why and where did that come from, and start questioning if it's actually truth or is it a story. Because stories are for creation, and what story are you telling yourself?
So when I did a podcast with you, I did a meditation at the end. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to ask you to lead us in a short meditation of whatever your heart desires. Mm-hmm. And for you to project your voice to all the people that listen to this. And they'll feel your heart.
Mm. Okay, perfect. Thanks for asking. Alrighty, so closing our eyes, and for all of you that are listening to this, as long as you're not operating a car or some heavy machinery, then please don't close your eyes. But if you are just listening at home or wherever you are that is in a safe place for you to be able to close your eyes, then please go ahead and do so. And just take a moment recognizing that when our eyes are closed, we tap into the realm of infinite possibility. Anything can happen, and we can only create as far as our imagination is willing to go. And so giving ourselves that permission to tap into that infinite landscape of our internal reality. And just connecting with your breath for a moment. Your breath is your anchor into the present moment. The only moment that we have for the rest of our lives is this one right now. And like we shared on this podcast, the universe is not going to give you what you want. The universe is going to give you who you are. And if you could allow all fractals of your consciousness to just land in this moment, being the only moment that exists, And through your breath is your anchor back here right now. In your mind's eye, your visualization, your imagination, your ability to create things in your mind with your eyes closed, I want you to visualize your 5-year-old self. Imagine your 5-year-old self walking over to you right now and looking at you. And with your imagination, can you picture what your 5-year-old self looked like? Can you feel the essence of your 5-year-old self? And in this moment, is there a message from your 5-year-old self that you have forgotten along the way? Did you get pulled into over seriousness? Did you forget what it is that really lights you up and sets your heart on fire, whether it was creating skits for your family, whether it was singing or drawing or being out in nature and going by the stream with your barefoot feet? What was it that you were doing at 5 years old before the world told you who you were supposed to be? And just getting quiet enough to be able to receive the message from my 5-year-old self. Because in this very message alone, there is a deep, latent genius here waiting for you. There is a genius that has not been tainted by the projections of the shoulds from the world. There is a magic of the expansive nature of your imagination that has something for you here. And in this moment, I want you to make a creed or a confirmation or an affirmation or a promise to your 5-year-old self. That you will remember that the creative adult is the child that survived. And by your birthright, by being a human with the capacity to pull a thought into physical form, you are a creator. And how can you give yourself the permission to remember your genius in this moment? Because it is a pilot light that never fully went out, but is just asking for your attention and intention to reactivate it. And this is going to look different for everybody, so give yourself the permission of your uniqueness, recognizing your uniqueness as your power. And now giving your 5-year-old self a really big hug. And a promise that you're not going to forget who it is that you are and why you came here. And remembering that there is something that you can do that not another single person on this planet can do. The universe is continuously giving who you are, so how can you give yourself permission to play a little bit more? To take the weight of over-seriousness off your shoulder, recognizing one of the greatest diseases on this planet is over-seriousness. And giving ourselves the permission to powerfully play, to create, not because of the goal, because of the process of itself, to get lost in the process of the timelessness of your unique genius. This is your permission, and there is something here for you. And my invitation for you is to get curious enough to be able to hear it, quiet enough to recognize that pure originality is born in silence. And so it's time for your pure originality to breathe. And know that this very piece itself is your contribution to the collective healing of this planet. So thank you for being alive. Thank you for existing. Thank you for your unique piece that you bring to the table. Thank you for being here, because if you weren't here, this world wouldn't be complete. Just the way that you are already perfect. So allowing your body to soften to that truth. You are a gift. And you have the opportunity and the permission slip to allow that 5-year-old self to live and breathe through you today, in this very moment, the only moment that we have for the rest of our lives. So with this prayer, this invitation, this meditation, and this activation being placed into the space, allowing yourself to have compassion for for every single thing that presents itself from this point forward, being the mother and the father of your own experience and no longer needing validation from anything outside of yourself but your own permission to be just the way that you are. Thank you for existing. And so it is.
Oh. Thank you so much. You did it again. You could not have known how impactful that would have been, at least for me. But I'll explain it later. But thank you so much for being here with me.
Thank you.
You're such a special human being, a true angel. And we're grateful that you're here and that you have the unique way that you see the world because of the unique circumstances in the life that you've created. All of it to bless us. Thank you for being who you are.
So it's an honor to be here. I'm so grateful and to be able to continue the conversation that we started. We've now done 3 podcasts together, which is such a gift in such a short period of time. And yet I think that there's such a powerful nature of the way that I perceive the world and the way that you perceive the world being so vastly different and yet so intricately connected. And it creates a whole from 2 aspects. Whole within themselves, but then also whole placed together. So I'm grateful and honored to be able to be given the opportunity to share my voice on your podcast and for all of those that tune into your work. And I'm looking forward to continuing to weave with you.
And I cannot wait to hear your voice inside the Great Pyramid.
I can't wait. I've been thinking about that. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I think
on
it's
my
definitely
33rd
meant to be
birthday.
On your 33rd birthday. That's epic.
For the effort.
I'm excited. Thank you so much. Well, that was definitely, we went deep, and Blue has this way of bringing us all into our hearts and making us remember who we are. Thank you. See you next time.